So this session is on learning strategy. So now that we have discussed about competencies of L&D professionals, we have talked about the stakeholder management part of it. So now we're going to move to learning strategy. Okay, so what I will do is I will first, meanwhile, our two panelists, I'll make them co-hosts so it will be easy for them to switch on the video and also the audio. All right, and yeah, there we go. So first, let me introduce you to Ranjit Khompi. He is the head L&D Reliance Retail Fashion and Lifestyle. Ranjit is an award-winning business professional with 24 years of experience across marketing, consulting, and HR. He has held leadership roles in product management, international trade, human capital consulting, global talent management, and P&L roles for international geographies across diverse sectors like office automation, automobiles, IT, outsourcing, insurance, telecom, and retail. Ranjit holds a bachelor's degree in electronics, PG diploma in foreign trade from Symbiosis Institute of International Management, an MBA in marketing from Pune University, along with HR credentials. So he is a senior certified professional from SHRM USA and chartered professional in human resource from CPHR Canada. So he's on SHRM's panel of global experts for SCP certification exam design and an assessor on CII's HR Excellence Awards. He's also a visiting lecturer, so he loves teaching students. So he visits Pune University and Nirva University as Institute of Management. And he brings his business and talent experiences while authoring numerous articles. He presents keynotes at international HR and L&D summits and in developing copyrighted training quantification methodology. In his current role, he leads talent readiness of 31,000 plus employees for fashion and lifestyle business of India's largest retailer by driving business outcome focused HR interventions. So, Ranjit, welcome to the conference and to this session on learning strategy.
Morning, Zubin.
And now I'm going to introduce Gauresh Gaitonde. He is the head L&D of at Neosoft Technologies. Gauresh is a senior L&D professional with 20 years of progressive work experience in the IT industry. He is accountable for overall learning strategy and implementation. He's passionate about developing capability and upholding the prominence of learning. He's accomplished in driving, communicating, and measuring programs to achieve business goals. He's an expert in blending storytelling with visual elements to produce tasteful learning experiences. He has worked with organizations like Emphasis, Trimax IT, Sears, Athos Center, and currently, of course, he heads L&D in Neosoft Technologies. He's received his education from Indian School of Business and University of Mumbai and holds numerous certifications including Leadership Development Program from HEC Paris, Strategy and Finance from Harvard Business School, Talent Management from Project Management Institute, amongst many other credentials. So Gauresh, welcome to our conference and to this session. So let us get started. I'm so happy to have you as panelists because I think this is going to add a lot of value to all our guests who are attending. And I'll start off with Gauresh with the foundational question on our session. So a learning strategy must be put in place for the organization. We all understand that, we accept that. So how is this learning strategy created? What has been your experience in it?
All right. Thank you so much, Zubin, for asking that. So when we think about a learning strategy, it is all about understanding what the goal of the organization is. We need to understand that first. And based on that, we create a long-term plan. So this is the whole foundation. We are creating a long term plan which will help us to achieve certain business goals. It could be a business goal, could be on a a business unit level, it could be on an organization level. Depending upon what an organization is trying to do, either during that year or as a part of its 3 year or 5 year plan, the learning strategy needs to be created. So, how do you create a learning strategy? The first bit is about understanding the business needs. It is extremely important for an L&D professional to be in the same room where business is discussed. So, it could be in the form of some kind of a business unit meeting, or it could be some kind of a strategic meeting that is happening where the organization is thinking about its larger goals. It could also be a learning and development professionals can also be a part of certain HR meetings where you're trying to think on an organizational level how you can achieve certain goals. So this is where your business needs would primarily come from. HR already has a seat at the table when it comes to these business meetings. It is extremely important for L&D professionals to also have that seat at the table. So once you do that, that is the key for you to become a business partner. Throughout my my journey as a learning and development professional, I have got the opportunity to see how things change once you become a part of that group. So once you are able to understand the business needs, what you need to do is prepare a business case. This particular business case would give you an insight into what kind of a challenge the business is facing, or what is it that they intend to do. You'll be able to understand who are the different stakeholders who are involved, and based on that, what are the different solutions that are there for each one of them. So when I say developing a learning strategy, don't think about a single strategy that would fit all your needs. Instead of that, look at it differently. Think on a top level in terms of who is the audience. Based on this, how can you map your strategy to these different groups? uh, there could be a very different approach to you managing something for a millennial. It will be completely different when you're talking about a highly experienced guy. uh, Depending upon what kind of infrastructure is available at different locations, you will have to change your strategy accordingly. All these things are extremely important when you're planning your strategy. The next bit is about your delivery method. Now, this is where it becomes more in terms of learning. So, how would you deliver your training? Obviously, the pandemic that started in lockdown and everything, it changed the way how we deliver training. For a lot of organization, there was a practice of using e-learning. There was a practice of conducting training using virtual means. But for a lot of other organizations, these things were not there. So how they worked with uh, these problems can be solved at a strategy level, where you can identify what should be the delivery method, and how would you really define performance. That is what is important. The next bit is about courseware, creating a learning path and understanding what are the enabling technologies. What kind of an LMS do you require? What kind of a virtual training environment do you need? How would you capture feedback? How would you do assessments? Is there a way for me to create lab sessions so that my technical training can be managed? All these things collectively give you an understanding of how the training would be executed on a ground level. Next is in terms of measurement and evaluation. You need to understand that what success would look like. How would you evaluate this particular success at different stages when you are executing the strategy? What are those checkpoints that you need to look out for? All these things become a part of measurement and evaluation. Then comes a very important part, and if you skip this particular part, you will see a lot of challenges coming in the long run. What you need to understand is what kind of resources are required and what kind of a budget do you need. So your resource and budget planning becomes an important part of the strategy. And finally, your learning and your overall learning plan. So how learning would look like for a given year from a top level, and how do you intend to communicate this with different groups? So, in a nutshell, if I want to put this, I would say understand your business needs, Prepare your business case, develop different strategies for different groups, identify delivery method and performance support, focus on your courseware, how the learning paths would be for different groups, and what are the technologies that are required, what technology platforms are required. Then move on to measurement and evaluation. Think about your resource and budget planning, and finally put in a learning plan and understand how you would like to communicate this to the larger organization. So this is pretty much how you can create a learning strategy.
All right. Great. Thanks, Gauresh. In fact, picking up your point on learning strategy, and of course, there are different elements, different factors that you've mentioned. I would like to go to Ranjit with this question. So there are so many factors, right? So there are different stakeholders involved. There are goals involved, and we have the next session. We're going to talk about how we're going to link L&D goals to business goals. But then that part is also part of the strategy. There are processes that we need to think about. There are budget related points that we have to take care of. I mean, there's a budget for everything. We can't just do our dream project as well. So considering all of these factors, what would be your take on this? I mean, what are these different aspects that we need to consider? Like Gauresh has also already pointed out, what are your views on that? How have you handled in terms of creating a learning strategy?
Yeah, Zubin. In fact, I think Gauresh has already talked about the entire approach, and I think he's detailed it nicely and looked at multiple aspects of creating the strategy. I think that's great, Gauresh. I think I'll just pick it up from there. I think one thing that Gauresh talked about is alignment of business, and I think that's the crucial thing. I've seen many L&D heads having an inside-out approach. What it means is they have a bouquet of programs, they have a set trainers or maybe set methodologies, and they will keep on taking the same thing again and again to business. Yeah. What we need to have is an outside in approach. Business dynamics are changing, customer preferences are changing, our way of doing business is also evolving. And especially the new normal will actually tell us that, okay, past is not equal to future. So looking at this, first of all, having that outside in approach in the five main areas that L&D can create a strategy impact. And that I think we should be able to visualize. I think, see, earlier, uh, expectation from L&D was to just train people on what they are. But if you look at today, what we need to do is the L&D strategy has to look at five areas. Okay, which are the five areas that in fact I have been looking at? One is attracting and retaining talent. Okay, we have to make sure that we have a view to it. Second is, of course, how do I, whoever has come in, how do I motivate and engage people so that I can actually reduce the infant attrition, for example? How do I help an organization create the employer brand? How can I create a culture that the organization wants to drive for tomorrow? And of course, in the process, develop people capabilities for today as well as tomorrow. Um, I'll take an example around it. Earlier, we were only expected to train people once they come in, and that typically we call this as a hire and train model. But what we are doing at Reliance is we are doing a source, train, and hire model. So what I'm involved with business and HR is right when the second last year of the students, okay, maybe it's a management student or a functional experts like NIFT or MDTI, we actually tie up with them and make sure that we have a strategy in place about how many of my lateral hires are going to be freshers and from where they're coming in. So L&D strategy actually starts about 1.5 2 years before what I want to achieve out of that, and that's where we come in to attract and retain talent to make sure that we have the best of the talent coming in. When we look at motivating and engaging people, we have to make sure that when we come in, right from the onboarding programs, how these are designed to ensure that we make sure that people get glued to the organization and make sure that they start performing and the learning curves is reduced so that organization has a higher profit to cost ratio. Or we look at employer brand. So today, whatever you might say, when employees, the talent is going to come to you, they're going to actually look at Glassdoor, they're going to look at LinkedIn, they're going to look at how things work around with you guys. Okay. Now, how do you create an employer brand where your current employees as well as the prospective employees start looking at how it works? And I think that's another thing that you need to look at, and that's what the strategy that L&D needs to create about how do I build people capabilities to create an employer brand. Culture. One of the best things that actually is happening today is basically the culture shift that is happening. Okay, while maintaining the current values that we are bringing in, but how do I get the new culture that needs to be there for today's tomorrow's world? How do I work with that? And I think that's where L&D has to look at an area of impact. And of course, last is people capabilities. When we look at creating the organization of tomorrow, and that's L&D strategy area, is about role readiness today, role readiness in near future, and of course, role readiness maybe 1.5, 2 years down the line, especially the hypo succession planning that we keep on talking about. So I would look at looking at Gauresh's plan, the way he talked about the how, and actually make sure these 5 areas that L&D should strategize in. And I think there should be a confluence of both in terms of what we should focus upon and how it can be taken ahead. This is my take, Zubin.
Absolutely, Ranjit. I think I'll just go on to Gauresh with another relevant question in terms of what we have faced in the last 1 year. So the pandemic, of course, and we've talked a lot about the pandemic during the pandemic, right? So there've been a lot of discussions on that. I have hosted some events and discussions where I've asked about it. But let me connect this more towards change, okay? Because I think I saw one of the questions that Manjit Mohan asked. It's good to have Manjit in the session. I mean, probably Manjit has a question on uh, aligning L&D strategy to business goals. So we will come to that question a little later. But first of all, think about the pandemic itself. It's an example of change that we're having to deal with. And so my question to Gauresh is, can you think of an experience that you had on dealing with change in terms of realigning the learning strategy? So what Manjit has also asked is about dynamic goals, right? So goals in today's world, the way we are working, so there would be a lot of changes happening. So your experience, Gauresh, on such a situation where you had to handle change and therefore realign the learning strategy.
Early 2020, when we were planning how to deliver training for the entire year, there were a lot of good plans in terms of how we can develop our leadership, how we can develop capability in terms of technical skills. Now I come from an IT organization, so that is where most of the training happens. So how do we build capability with different technologies? And then it was more in terms of what are the budgets that are required in order to accomplish these goals. Now, when the pandemic started and when the whole lockdown scenario really hit us, obviously resources got affected, our budget got affected because of it. But more importantly, it was in terms of what should we do and what should we do now. That is how the whole thinking changed. So there were three specific areas that I can think of where a lot of realignment was required. So if I think about leadership development, for example, the whole focus was more in terms of how a particular team leader can manage a group from a remote location. Till this time everybody was coming to work and everybody was managing employees who were sitting right in front of them, but now that scenario has changed. So how do you enable that? How do you enable team leaders to manage their teams from different locations? How do you ensure that you communicate with them regularly? All these points became important. At the same time, it was also about employee welfare. We just wanted to ensure that since people are getting affected, and there were different reasons. I mean, some of our folks, they went to their native places. Some of them had challenges in terms of connectivity. Some of them had challenges in stuff. In a way, a lot of different challenges that they were facing. So we reached out to people. We tried to understand what is it that they were doing, what kind of challenges they were facing, and based on that, we were able to make changes to our strategy. The programs that I had in the month of February, the how I was looking at them, and in the month of March, and how they looked like in the month of April, there was a huge difference in that. That was the first bit. The second bit was in terms of communication. Uh, it is easy for an L&D group to go and reach out to people, send out emails, possibly have a couple of meetings and arrange some training programs. But now our platform is changing. We no longer have a classroom. Instead of that, we are using a digital platform in order to conduct our training sessions. When I do that, I can no longer do programs which are 8 hours and 16 hours because people lose attention span. So therefore, that became an important thing. So when it comes to the strategy, when it comes to the courseware, the mode of delivery, these were the points which got affected. And therefore, the solution was more in terms of how do I take a single training which is for 40 hours and break it into 30 days. That was the way how we managed that particular issue. If I want to do a training session, what is the maximum amount of time an employee can spend being on a call? At the same time, employees were also facing a lot of challenges. Some of them did not have proper internet connectivity. So how do you come online? How do you enable your video? These were the challenges that people were facing. So again, we go back to HR, and HR was able to enable these things, possibly by sending dongles or enabling them to have a good internet plan. All these things became important. So the budget was not just utilized in terms of training, but it was also utilized in terms of enabling people to start working with us. So collectively, if you think about it, the way we delivered program, the way the course changed, the courseware changed, the way we communicated, and the way the overall learning platform had changed for us. Uh, these were the significant changes that we saw when it came to change management during the pandemic.
Right, absolutely. In fact, I want to continue with this question with Ranjit also, because I think changes, dealing with changes has now become part and parcel of more or less every function in an organization because of the dynamics that we're dealing with. So, Ranjit, maybe change or maybe something else, but how? What does successful execution of learning strategy look like? What about your experience in your maybe in the present organization in any past organization that you created a learning strategy and you successfully executed it? So let's hear about that. I think that experience would help us learn a lot.
Yeah, I think any learning strategy, the fruits are when you actually see them hanging from the tree, right? It's not about how tall the tree goes. So typically what we look at is any L&D strategy, if unless until you define the key lead indicators and the lag indicators that are going to be the milestones for your strategy, the strategy is bound to fail. Then any direction is the right direction, or any achievement is the right achievement. So typically what happens is when we look at it, or I've seen organizations looking at on multiple aspects around it, is that they clearly define the learning lead indicators, and it could be as simple as level 1 and level 2 of your effectiveness that you actually look at, or the way you actually see it as an impact on the surrounding or co-workers around it. We can also look at the difference between the focus group and the non-focus group. So those are the early shoots that you can actually look at that, okay, you're in the right direction. You may not have actually reached at the level 3 or level 4, but these are lead indicators that you can keep on tracking and make sure that the governance is in place to ensure that your learning strategy works. Of course, your lag indicators of actual people behavior that starts coming in from level 3 or the KPI impact that business always wanted. See, we started actually, and what we and Gauresh and I both have been talking about is that we are here to make sure enable a business outcome to be achieved, or a people problem to be solved, or a customer issue to be resolved. See, there are three things, and there is nothing beyond that. Either you're dealing with a business issue, you're dealing with a people issue, or you're dealing with a customer issue. Unless until your learning strategy is aimed to resolve any of these problems, which are clearly defined as an outcome, and you start working with the end in mind, then that's the lag indicator that you work upon. So to make sure that you know that the learning strategy is working and is clear in the right direction, is you look at the lead indicators, and then you start focusing and making sure that the rigor required for the lag indicator number one, which is your behavioral change of your people, which sustains the change that we've been talking about, is tracked, measured, and sustained. People have a tendency to go back to earlier days, and as soon as you are off. Okay, for example, we've been running a strategy, an intervention right now. We started from September. we got excellent results, and then we said, okay, let's actually give it to operations and let them run it completely. And we saw as soon as the review mechanism was off, people tended to go back. So when you're driving a change, it's also important that the behavioral change is not only sustained, but it at least is impacted over 3 months to really make sure that that impact stays with that, and you start getting the business outcome which are expected as a final end goal. I think this is the entire journey. And as a L&D head or an L&D professional, in fact, my suggestion would be to make sure that while you are focused on execution, I see a lot of L&D professionals love to talk in front of the audience. But more importantly, the L&D person has to develop analytical ability to have another eye on the milestones, the lead and the lag indicators to ensure that the learning strategy is on the right path, achieves the right goal, and finally the stakeholders come back and saying, you know what, this change happened only because of learning. I see a lot of times people come back saying, okay, L&D did, but there could be other factors, right? When you've done all the entire process in place, you can go back with a pride saying that, okay, this has happened only because of L&D, and you can take the credit for it. I think you're right. In fact, that's why when we started working on it last year, we really dwelled deep into this, and we looked at all the micro and macro factors that we need to keep in mind about what could credit a business outcome, and can we give that particular percentage of influence areas into that. And once we did that, we could call out what is the L&D impact out of the strategy achievement, business strategy achievement and L&D strategy achievement. And that's where we copyrighted the Reliance training quantification methodology, right? So it is win-win for both. It's win for business, it's win for HR and L&D also.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that experience, Ranjit. And that brings me to one of the questions I've got in the Q&A box again from Manjit. So he says, L&D strategy and culture building in an organization. How easy or how difficult is this? And any specific examples of work which you would have done in this space, which is very abstract. Again, the point is L&D strategy and culture building. How does that connect? How easy is that? Did you have any such experience? I mean, it could be a grand success, or it could be at least an effort made. But how is it? How does that work? So let me ask Gauresh, but I will also want your views on this, Ranjit, after Gauresh speaks.
Sure.
Right. I'll just give you one example in terms of, and this is something which started a couple of years ago, and it is picking up speed, and it is something which is very dear to L&D professionals, HR professionals, and everybody who is involved with new generation of employees. What I'm talking about is millennials and Gen Z who are entering the organization. They require a very different strategy. You cannot, work the way you used to work some 10 or 15 years ago and expect that the same results will work for these guys as well. So this is one big change in terms of culture, in terms of yeah, the way the generation is changing, the way we look at delivering results. Uh, what I would like to point out, and again, I come from an IT organization, so over here we have a lot of campus hires who join in every year, fresh from college. These people come from different cities. It could be tier 2, tier 3 cities as well. Each one of them looks at the same education from a very different perspective. Their goals are very different. No longer the motivation is just related to I would like to make money, or I just want to go on site, but things have changed completely. So understanding the culture of the organization is very important. And since a very large number of people are entering the organization and making changes, there will be a huge impact in terms of what kind of culture they bring in because of their age and their generation, and at the same time what is it that the organization wants to establish as a culture. So when these two things are happening, you really require a great strategy in order to solve this. Understanding the target audience over here becomes important. Once you are able to understand them, you are able to make changes. You are able to understand how I can make changes to the current way of doing things. You would have seen that a lot of there were a couple of years ago, if you can think of it, most employees would not actually reach out to their CEOs and talk to them directly. But today, with social media, today with all these town halls happening, a lot of things going online, people have that kind of access. They can reach out to the CEO of the organization, a very senior VP within the organization, and because of this access, they have a way for making changes. Allow this change. Okay, align the way your new generation is with the business goals, and see how a great change will take place. So this is one thing that I can think of in terms of culture and learning strategy.
All right, great. Thanks, Gauresh. Ranjit, your views on that? Any experience on this?
I think quite valid. In fact, one of the key things that L&D can really influence organization is through culture change. Because culture is formed by people, and L&D is all about people. Right? HR might take care of engagement part of it, but changing the thought mindset or the skills and the knowledge and all contribute to an employee behavior. And what employees behave is what an organization culture is, right? So one of the key things that we have been actually focusing for the last about 2.5 3 years at Reliance is ensuring that we contribute largely, and large part of our work is building that culture. I'll give you an example. So last year, around the same time, in fact, we were just around the pandemic that was happening, and 24th, Honorable Prime Minister ordered a lockdown. And for a business like us, which is completely customer focusing, right? And all our shops, okay, we have got about more than 1,500 shops all over India, and about 13,000 shops across all formats of retail, all closed overnight. Your revenue streams came to zero, but your employee costs and all other costs remain same. So when the lockdown opened partially from May, and so we slowly started limping back to normalcy. Uh, Everyone expected that okay, everything will be normal, but it was not normal. One of the biggest drivers for our revenue is customer footfall, and customer footfall came down to more than 40%, about 40 to 45%, about compared to the previous years. Also, the customers who were coming in were very clear what they want to buy. They were not buy there to buy leisure shopping. They were to buy pajamas, t-shirts, because that's what needed. So they would come in, buy, and then just get out of the shop because of all the fears that was there. So we got an impact on two parts. Number of customers came down, and second, the dwell time of customers came down from about 40 45 minutes in our stores to about 15 to 20 minutes. Now, less the customer is in the store, less is a chance of buying more items. So our revenue not only reduced because of the customers, but also reduced further because of the dwell time of the customers. Now, our culture was till the time, and Reliance culture has been that okay, you support a customer only if the customer asks you. Okay, don't intrude into the private space of the customer when the customer is shopping in your stores. Now, if you continue with that, and the customer, of course, would want to maintain more than 6 feet distance and all these things, you would want you there is no additional opportunity to make sale from the same customer. So that's how we saw an opportunity as L&D, and we said, okay, what is it that we can do to support business out here? Because by this way, we will be achieving only 30% of the revenue compared to the last year, and that will be disastrous because it will actually mean losing a lot of people and losing a lot of job, and that's a bigger thing that we have in our mind. So we worked on it, and we created a L&D strategy to make sure that we change two things. We change our culture of our employees about how do they deal with customers. We change the customer interaction, and most importantly, make sure that we bring in more wallet share from the same number of customers coming. We started with this. We piloted in August. We got some success in one region. We took it national in October, November, December. I'm happy to say that we've been actually contributing to hundreds of crores rupees, which are credited to L&D as a revenue generator. So we are not a cost center anymore, a revenue generator. But most importantly, what has happened is we changed people's culture from a kind of assisted selling to a suggestive selling, to reactive approach to a proactive approach, to just offering a garment to offering and complimenting on the look. See, when a customer comes to my shop, he's not coming to buy a garment. He's coming or she's coming there to look better, to look beautiful, to look handsome, to get ready for a particular event. Now, unless until my person is ready to do that and offer him those words which are important, and especially for Indian customers, we don't buy from head, we buy from heart. And we need to feel that, okay, we look nice in the garment, and someone has to tell us that. Now, when you're shopping alone or in the group, you would want to go to the trial room, check ourselves, and come back and say, "Am I looking nice or not?" So, if you have someone like a CSA who proactively tells a person that you're looking nice, okay, this will look good, this will not look good on a black shirt that you're trying, don't wear a blue jean, but wear a beige jean. That particular communication approach enables and gives confidence to the customer that he can buy this and he can buy this more. This has been a major shift that has happened that we've made as L&D, and I'm proud to do that. Is basically that's been also awarded as the L&D Strategy of the Year across Reliance in terms of how we are taking it ahead. I think it's a combination of two things. It's a combination of what is that we want to do in the culture, what business would like to say, and partnering with HR and business to make sure this culture change happens. And of course, this is sustained. So we've been able to monitor it on a daily basis with all the leading and lag indicators about culture shifts. We've decided, we actually looked at through information about how we can trace it. And this culture change has actually trickled down to the last person. And we are very happy that we've been able to actually drive it.
All right, I think that's an apt example you've given in terms of the shift in the way we think about what our goal is and the way we implement that as well. I think in terms of learning strategy, I think that's the role that the L&D function plays, is to also analyze the situation and understand how we can bring about that change in terms of business. So I think this one example shows how, and the, the number in terms of revenue is something that internally you can always calculate what kind of impact it had, but it definitely would have an impact, and that would ideally directly, in this example, I would say directly goes to the L&D function and the interventions that L&D did. I have one more question which I can take in the time that we have. So the question comes from Rupa Shende. She asks, in your experience, where do you see more resistance for learning strategy follow through? So you create a learning strategy, but for follow through, where do you see more resistance? Is it from the employees or is it from senior management? And how can you deal with the same? So this is an open question. Whoever wants to take it.
Gauresh, should I take it?
Sure.
Okay. See, I think Zubin, it's my question, my answer would be all levels. Okay, follow through, because see, a strategy looks beautiful on the paper. However, and it's from authority perspective, it is nice to take it as an L&D, you should go ahead and do it. But they do not understand that any strategy implementation is not implementation in isolation. It's a systems thinking. Okay, it's a systems approach. There are a lot of upstream and downstream linkages whenever a strategy is implemented. There are shared responsibilities around it. Now, typically what happens, I've seen that even though you might create a RACI matrix, okay, responsibility, accountability, counseling, and information metrics, right? When it comes to actually executing it, actually owning the actions, I've seen lag from all the people across. And it's not, I wouldn't actually crucify employees saying that, okay, leadership agrees with, the employees don't want it because they are the ones who have to change it. But I've seen that kind of dragging of feet happening from all levels. One of the ways to deal with it, and in my experience, has been that you through a weekly connect on what has happened last week, what is happening this week, what is it that we plan to do next week. In that, what all of us has to do it. Are we aware? Are we clear? Is it clear with everyone? Have we bought into it? If you have anything, let us know. You have to keep them warm over 3 weeks on a weekly basis to make sure that the strategy gets executed. Otherwise, people get tons of mails every day. They attend tons of meetings. What they committed, what they've received, they conveniently forget, intentionally, unintentionally. So one of the ways to make sure that the strategy follow through happens is keeping in mind all of us are humans. We tend to shrug away from what is it that is needed. We are ready to take authority, but not responsibility. So make sure that you keep the entire strategy milestones warm through a 3-week view, last week, this week, and next week, in terms of past, present, and future. You will be able to ensure that the follow through happens and in the direction that you want to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer, Ranjit. Would you mind taking one more? There's one more question we've got from Aditi Johari. So Aditi asks, how do you explain or convince business stakeholders to invest in L&D initiatives. So I think I'll go to Gauresh with this question first, and then if we have time, I'll ask Ranjit about his views also. How will you convince
Sure.
the stakeholders, business stakeholders?
I started this whole conversation by saying that, when you are building a learning and development strategy, the first set of people you need to talk to is the business unit, basically. Uh, you need to understand what their goals are. You need to deliver training which will give some value to whatever it is that they have planned, whatever challenges they are facing, or certain things that they intend to achieve at the end of the year, or possibly as a part of their 5-year plan. Whatever it is, you need to understand that, align your entire strategy to that. And when you do that, don't just create something saying that yes, this is what I intend to achieve, and let us see how it works out. So this is where the part which Ranjit spoke about, lead measures become important. Don't leave your entire strategy to lag measures. Instead of that, uh, plan your lead measures, see how you're moving against that particular plan. If you see that while you're in execution mode, if there are any kind of challenges that you're facing, make changes in such a way that you are able to achieve that particular the particular set of goals that you have set at that point of time. uh, if you are able to do that, if you are able to clearly create that kind of a path, it becomes very easy for you to ensure that your stakeholders, whether it is in terms of your senior management, or whether it is in terms of anybody else who is possibly a sponsor for this, whoever it is, they will support you. They will invest in your initiatives because it is going to directly impact their goals. So if that kind of an alignment exists, I think it will become very easy for L&D to go ahead with those initiatives.
Quite true, Gaurav. In fact, just to build on to what you said right now, I think um, they understand the impact, and quite true. A lot of times, however, they do not understand the implications of what is happening. So one of the ways that we actually deal with is basically do the implication mapping. And two departments that actually I always go to really map the implications. See, understand business knows and breathes only one language. Whatever we might actually say for consultants and media, we understand and learn only one language, it is money. And there is one department which can convert anything into money is finance. And there is one department which can convert anything into numbers is your quality department or analytics department. So these are two departments which I always work with. So I pick up a problem, I pick up a business strategy, and actually work with these two departments, which are friends of mine now because I've been able to help them achieve their targets, is convert this into two parts. One is the process gaps and create an implication on people, customers, and I look at the money gaps and actually get the implications. Whatever strategy I create, I pick up data from these and show the implications of not doing it or doing it. That actually aids my business case making. I actually say, okay, you know what, when, like for example, I'll pick up the last example that I talked about. I said, we need a culture change. And they said, oh, why do you need it? Because would people take it? I said, you will have 10% growth in your revenue. Are you interested? So we'll move from about 10,000 crores to 11,000 crores next year. Would you be game? There's no businessman who will say no to my business strategy. And I can probably say that we actually achieved more than that because that target we achieved in 6 months itself. So what typically happens is pick up these two departments on your side, finance and quality. Finance will give you the implications, verified data of numbers coming in and impact on business. Second, quality will give you all the data indicators and analysis that is required for you because we honestly, L&D is not really number people. We are behavioral, functional, domain and human psychology people. So these two will help you create a business case and you can actually build on it and go back to your boardrooms.
All right. Thank you, Gauresh. Thank you, Ranjit, for the answer to that last question. I think very well summarized as well. Since we are talking about learning strategy, this last question also helped us in summarizing the points. And I think the experiences that you've shared, along with your perspectives, I think that brings us those practical implications because we talk a lot theoretically about what should be done, should not be done, but hearing from you about your experiences and how you've been able to apply learning strategy, I think that's what gave us a lot of points to learn and to muse over, to think over. So thank you so much, Ranjit. Thank you so much, Gauresh, for being part of this session. Very happy to have you here, and I'm sure we'll stay connected and we'll have further such discussions in the future.
Sure, Zubin. Thanks, Gauresh, and all the best for the balance day, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.